Beginning on Daf, Mesech the Sotah Daf Yud Gimel. Begin on the bottom of Yud Beis and Beis, 3 lines up at the bottom of the Yamid. The Gemara continues in the related discussion for the previous Daf, where we're discussing very appropriately now for Chalamoid Pesach the inyanim of Yitzias Mitzrayim, of the Shibur of Mitzrayim, and we spoke about the baby Moshe in the water, and the daughter, the sister of Moshe, Miriam, telling Tabas Paroi, I'm going to go get the mother, and we continue on that theme regarding the relationship of Miriam to Moshe and to that of Aaron regarding Moshe being born and the whole hishtalshlus of that time period in history. I'm sure it's close about the I'm joining with today's daf. So, discussing today's daf are the nisim that transpired during Yaakov's kavura, the methods that Moshe used to locate Yosef's kever, again when they were leaving Mitzrayim, the transfer of Yosef's kever from Mitzrayim to Shechem, where he was ultimately buried, the events that took place on the day of Moshe Rabbeinu's passing. So, we're first finishing up the discussion from the previous daf regarding the relationship of Miriam and Moshe. So, with 3 lines up at the bottom of the Amid, it says in the pasuk in Shemais, "V'tikach Miriam hanaviyah achis Aaron v'gomer." So it says by the Shiras Hayam, by the Kriyas Yamsuf, which we're going to learn very shortly. So it says that Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, she took the drums in her hands, and all the women went out. But 2 women mecheles. So the Gemara says, "Wait a second. Aaron Moshe? What are you saying? The sister of Aaron? She's not the sister of Moshe?" So on that says the Gemara, some say it was Amar of Nachman Merav. Melambis comes to teach. We're talking about that she was the Neviah, the pasuk says. Miriam the Neviah was Achais Aaron. Because when did she say a prophecy? Kishi Achais Aaron, when she was the sister of Aaron. Meaning when Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't born yet, she was then the prophetess, the sister of Aaron. As the Gemara continues on top of Yud Gimel and Al. Because she prophesied as a little girl and she said, Asida imi shetelid ben, my mother's going to ultimately give birth to a son, Shemashiach Yisrael, that's going to save the Jewish people. Once Moshe Rabbeinu was born, the whole house was filled up with light. So our father stood up, he kissed her on her head. Amalai said to Biti, my daughter in the sky, your prophecy has been fulfilled. Now, but once they threw Moshe Rabbeinu into the river, our father got up, he slapped her on the head. Amalai said to her, Biti, my daughter, where's your prophecy? And that's what it says in the pasuk, that his sister was standing from a distance, to know what was going to happen to him. Meaning the sister of baby Moshe was looking into the water to see what's going to happen. What does that mean? To know what's going to be with the end of her prophecy. She knew she had a prophecy. She knew that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to save the Jewish people. How's this possible? What's going on? So she was looking to see what's going to happen to him because she wanted to see what's going to be the miracle of her brother, because she knew it was going to happen. But again, that's why the pasuk says Achis Aaron, because when Aaron was only around, not Moshe, is when she prophesies. Now, going back to the topic of the Mishnah, which really was why we introduced all this Agadah to, because we're talking about the Sotah, that she gets punished Mida Keneged Mida. So the Mishnah had said that Schar and Einish are dispensed in the same way as in which the person performed the mitzvah or committed the Aveira. So the Mishnah had described regarding those who buried others, and then they got the merit to be buried in the same way. So the Mishnah had said, Yosef Zacha Likbris Aviv, Bechulu, etc., which the Mishnah said he merited to bury his father. Now, the Ein Ba'achiv Goldman, there was no one greater than him from all the brothers. So therefore, he merited to be buried by Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Gemara says the following question. Maishna Meikara, why is it in the beginning, the pasuk says, so we're talking about, again, because we're talking about Yosef burying his father, because it's related to the idea of Mida Keneged Mida, so the Gemara now gets into this idea about burying Yaakov Avinu by Yosef. So why is it in the beginning the Chsiv it says Vayal Yosef Likbres Av, Yosef went up to bury his father because they took him from Mitzrayim up to Eretz Canaan. It says Vayalu Ito Kolavdi Pagle Begoyim, and all the slaves of Par went up with him, etc. Now but then it says V'chol Beis Yosef Ve'echav, and all the family of Yosef Ve'echav and his brothers, the Beis Aviv and his father's household. Meaning that here we mention the Egyptians before the brothers of Yosef. It says Vayalu Ito Kolavdi Pagoi, and then it says V'chol Beis Yosef Ve'echav Beis Aviv. So before the brothers of Yosef, it mentions first the Egyptians. But then the Ma'ishna, why is it different when they came back from Canaan back to Mitzrayim? The Chsiv says V'yoshav Yosef Mitzrayim, that Yosef came back to Mitzrayim. Who ve'echav him and his brothers, and then it says, and all those who came up with him to bury his father. So on the way up, it mentions the Egyptians and then the brothers of Yosef. On the way back, it mentions first the brothers of Yosef and then the Egyptians. What's the reason? So and he says, because Betchila in the beginning, before they didn't see the honor of the Jewish people, the Egyptians didn't treat them with respect. So therefore they went before the brothers of Yosef. But at the end, when they saw their honor, so then they treated them with honor. It says in the pasuk, it says that they came over there till the granary of the atad, of the thorns. Now the question is there a threshing floor for thorns? What do you mean? Do you usually gather thorns and make a granary out of it? So Amar Bavo, he says, no, Malami comes to teach us shehikifu kesarim, that they had surrounded with crowns la'aroinish Yaakov, to the coffin of Yaakov, kegoirin zeh, like this granary shemekifin le'atad, that they surrounded with a wall of thorns to protect the granary. So that's goirin atad. It was the granary that was surrounded by thorns. Meaning like that, which is because the crown surrounded his coffin. Because when they were coming to that area, which is where Edom is, and Seir, and the Bnei Yishmael, and Bnei Keturah, so Tanu Nabraisa, Kulam L'Mechavim B'Hayu. They all came first to actually wage war. When they saw the crown of Yosef was hanging on the coffin of Yaakov, not Lukulon Kisreim, so they all took their crowns, but Talum Ba'aroinish Yaakov, and they also hung it on the coffin of Yaakov. Tanu in the Braisa, Shleishim V'Shisha Kesarim, there were 36 crowns, Nitlu Ba'aroinish Yaakov, that were hanging on the coffin of Yaakov. You had 12 Nesim of Yishmael, like we have, it says in Bereshis, and there were 23 Lufim that are counted by Esav, which also is in Bereshis Perek Lamed Vav, and then there was Yosef's, which was a total of 36. Rashi says we have others that are mentioned as two, but that's the ultimate count that it comes down to, which is 36 crowns. Now it says V'yispadu sham misped gadol v'kavim ma'od, that they went and they eulogized over there, a great eulogy that was very heavy. So when the Braisa afila susim afila chamayrim, that even horses and even donkeys, they all were mourning the death of Yaakov. Now, says the Gemara, but once they came to the cave that was doubled, the Esav held up the process that he's not going to let Yaakov be buried over there. He said to them, the pasuk says, that this area, it was called Kiryat Arba. Why? Because it only could contain 4 piers. Now, which Rashi tells us this teaching of Yitzchak was not being said by Esav, the Gemara is saying it, to say why was Esav holding up the procedure, because most definitely that was what Esav meant to say, that it only holds 8 graves. Kiryat Arba, the pairing of the 4, Arba Zugasayu, there was 4 pairs. You have Odom Mechava, Avram V'Sara, Yitzchak V'Rivka, and then Yaakov V'Leah. The problem was, so Esav is saying, Ihu Yaakov Kavro L'Leah B'Didei, he buried Leah in his portion that he gets. Like he says, B'Shama Kavarti Leah. Yaakov himself said that that's where I buried Leah. Now, we're 2 brothers, we inherited our father. There's 2 more, there was 2 more left. He got 1, he gave for his wife, I get the other one. Amrullah, they said to him, no, Zabinta, you, when you sold the Bechira, you sold that portion that you had the Maras of Machpelah. So on that, Esav responded, says, what do you mean? You're right, although I sold the double portion, I'm not going to take a double portion, my firstborn, but I'll take like him, like a regular brother. My regular portion, you think I sold? That I didn't sell, and that I still get. I get the other grape. Amrullah, they said to him, yes, it's obvious that you sold also your portion in the cave totally. Because the Chsiv, this is what our father told us when he passed away, B'kivri, bury me in my grave, asher karisi li. What's karisi? It could mean digging, but it means it was sold. Like in the maritime cities, So our father said that you sold it to him, even your regular portion. He said to them, Havli Garta, bring me the letter, show me the document of the sale. They said to him, that document is in the land of Egypt. Who's going to go? Nazel Naphtali the Kolakei Yalta. Let Naphtali go, who he's swift like a deer, the chsiv, like it says, a person in Bereshis. Naphtali, Ayala Shlucha. Naphtali is a swift, is a deer that's sent. Hanis Nimrei Shefer, that gives beautiful words. Now Amr Bavoy says, Al Tikri Imrei Shefer, don't read it, those who say beautiful words, Ela Imrei Sefer, the words of the scroll, which was referring to this episode that he was sent to go get the document to prove to Esav that it was bought. Now, the Gemara, however, tells us Hushim, Beredu Dan Taman Hushim was the son of Dan, that he was over there, Bikiran le'udne, and his ears were heavy, mean to say, from hearing, he was hard of hearing. So, Amalu, he said to them, My hi, what's going on? He saw that the burial was being held up. They said to him, this one Esav is holding up. Until Naphtali comes from Egypt and brings with him the document. He said to them, until Naphtali comes from the land of Egypt. My grandfather is going to be laying in a state of disgrace that we can't bury him. Shakal kulfa, he went and he took a stick, machya reshe, hit Esav on the head, and Natran Eine, his eyes popped out, v'nofla karade Yaakov, and it fell on the knees of Yaakov. Peschinu Yaakov le'ene. So Yaakov opened up his eyes, v'achach, and he smiled. Behind the chsiv, this is what means the pasuk in Tehillim. Yismach tzaddik, the righteous is joyous, kichaz enaka, when he sees revenge. Pa'amav yirchat bedam rasha. His feet, like here, it was his knees, will bathe with the blood of the wicked. Which, famous the Bali Musa say that we get so accustomed to things that what everyone else should have also said, what's going to be my grandfather's in the state of disgrace. But we get so accustomed to it, so we don't. But he was hard of hearing, and he was told, he went crazy, and that's the way it is. How could it be Bazayan? He went and they killed him. It was at that moment that the prophecy of Rivka was fulfilled. The Chsev, it says in the pasuk, she was telling Yaakov to run away because Esau wanted to kill him. Why should I lose both of you in the same day? Why should that be? That was she was saying, this prophecy that when Yaakov dies, Esau will die. Now, because as the Gemara tells, because although their actual death was not on the same day, because obviously Yaakov was buried earlier until he went over Mitzrayim to Eretz Canaan, but their burial was on the same day. Now the Gemara wonders, now this is the main point why we brought this in. What do you mean? You told me that it's Midi Keneged Midi because Yosef buried Yaakov, therefore he merited that he should be buried by Moshe Rabbeinu. He's the greatest, and he's the greatest. But if Yosef wasn't going to be engaged in burying his father, his brothers would not have been engaged. In other words, how did they let their brother Yosef to go take the whole responsibility to bury their father? What, they just threw off the yoke and they weren't concerned? And if Yosef wouldn't have done it, they wouldn't have done it? But V'ksiv, says in the pasuk, that his sons carried him to the land of Canaan. Obviously, that even they were engaged in the carrying and the burying of their father. But what ended up happening was that after that their father was being buried, they made it dependent on Yosef like he was the primary. The Gemara says, Amru, the brothers said between themselves, let Yosef be engaged in more than the rest of us, because the honor of our father is greater by kings than by regular people. Yosef is a king, and therefore they let Yosef do it. Of course, the sons, the rest of the brothers, were involved in the burial of their father. Now, so then the Mishnah told us, who's greater to us than Yosef, who buried his father, and he merited so that he should be buried through Moshe. And that's the same thing that Moshe merited to be buried by Hashem. Now, Torah learned the Braisa regarding this idea about Moshe Rabbeinu burying Yosef. So it wasn't such a simple thing. Torah learned the Braisa, how dear were mitzvahs on Moshe Rabbeinu. Shekol Yisrael Kul in the Saska Bebiza, all the Jewish people were engaged in plundering the monies of the Egyptians. And he was engaged in mitzvahs. Like it says in Pasuk Mishli, Chacham Leiv, the wise of the heart, Yikach mitzvahs, will take the mitzvahs, v'goyim, etc. That was Moshe Rabbeinu. Everyone's taking out money and packing up their duffel bags with gold and silver, and Moshe Rabbeinu is taking the bones of Yosef. Now says the Gemara, how did Moshe Rabbeinu know where Yosef is buried? They said, Serach bas Asher, the daughter of Asher, the one of the Shvatim, her daughter was Serach. She remained from that generation. Which discuss exactly the details. But Halach Moshe Etzla. Moshe Rabbeinu went to the Baba Serach, the El to the Vabel, and he said, Amallah, he said to her, Klumat Yudas, do you know Heichen Yosef Kaba, where is Yosef buried? Amallah, she said to him, Aron Shamatechas Asal Mitzvim. The Egyptians went and made a coffin made out of metal, the Kavup Nilas Hanar, and they put him into the river Nilas, that the water should be blessed at all times, because in Egypt they didn't have rainwaters. It was all from different ditches and canals that came from the Nilas River all the way till the end of the country, many parsais. Now the Nilas would rise and water and bless and fill up all the other canals, and that's how they would water the fields. So to have it blessed, they put in the body of Yosef. Halach Moshe v'amar al svas Nilas. And Moshe Rabbeinu went and he stood at the end of the Nilas. Amar lo, he said to him, Yosef, higia ha'es. The time has come, Shenishba Kadosh Baruch Hu, that God has sworn, Shanigol Eschem, that I'm going to redeem you. Higia shvur sheshbate Yisrael. This time has come for the oath that you made the Jewish people swear. If you show yourself good, we're going to be cleansed from your oath. Right away, the coffin of Yosef floated to the top. Now, Valtitma says, don't wonder, how is it possible that iron is floating? There's a passage in Melachim Beis that says, that there was by one of them, meaning by the students of Elisha, Hanavi, that that he had a beam that fell in, and the iron fell into the water, etc. Aha, daini, oh my master, bushal, and it's borrowed, meaning it was lent to me, and now it fell into the river. But Yomei Ishalakim, so the man of God said, on the nafel, where did it fall in? And they showed him the place. But Yaakov ate, and he set the wood, but Yashlach Sham, and he threw it over there. But Yotzev Abazel, and the iron went and floated to the top. Says the Gemara, it's a Kabul Chaymer. If Elisha Nabi, Talmid Eliyahu was a student of Eliyahu. Eliyahu, Talmid Eliyahu was a student of Moshe, which Rashi said not that he learned from Moshe, it's just the Torah of Moshe was learned by Eliyahu Nabi. And Tzav Bazal Mipanav, and his student had that the iron should float to the top. All the more so that he had the coffin of Yosef float to the top. Now that's one interpretation. A second version of this, Rabbi Nosson, he says, he was buried in the catacombs of the kings, which are a Greek word of the Egyptians. So Moshe went and he stood by where the mummies are, where they're buried by the kings, of the Egyptian kings. He said, Yosef, the time has come when God has said, I'm going to redeem you. The time has come for your oath that you made the Jewish people swear. Show yourself good. We're going to be cleansed from your oath. But at that moment is the coffin of Yosef shook, and he was able to tell which one was Yosef's. Not the Moshe Beviyatzloi. So Moshe went and he took it and he brought it to himself. And all those years when the Jews were in the desert, there were these two coffins, not really coffins, there were these two aronis, like an aron, like a box. One was from the dead one, from Yosef, and one was from the divine presence, going one with the other one, because Moshe Rabbeinu was there and he had the coffin with him. Passerbys would say, what's going on? What's these two boxes? They said, one's of a dead one and one's of the divine presence. Now they said, what's a dead person going with the divine presence? They said, as he continued to Omid Beis. This one fulfilled whatever is written in this, which Rashi brings from the Agadah in the Mechilta in Parshas Beshalach, that by this one it says Anoichi, and by this one it says Hasachas Lehim Anoichi, meaning in the Lucha it says Anoichi Hashem Lekecha, and by Yosef it says when the brothers were afraid that Yosef is going to punish them after Yaakov passed away, he says Hasachas Lekim Anoichi. By this it says Lo Yilecha, the second of the Luchas, and he says Ho Lekim Aniyira, and here it says Lo Sisa in the Torah, and here he says Chei Parai. It's about swearing, and this is Zachas. He's going through the Aseret Adibros. Zachas Yom HaShabbos. And he says, when the brothers came, when he accused them of spies, he said, let's go eat the meal. And as Rashi says, that's only for the day of Shabbos. Like it says, V'chinas, they should prepare what they're going to bring. And he says, all that says the Divrus, the Mechilta shows, all those words and terminology, we find Yosef saying the same type of words. Also, we find he was Mekayim Le'sisnas Achicha B'Vavecha, he was Mekayim Le'sikim, Le'siter, V'chai Chichi Yimach. In other words, he was Mekayim the whole Torah, and therefore it's appropriate that his Aron should be next to the Aron of the Shechina. Now, the Gemara asks a similar question as we had asked regarding the Yosef and his brothers. Ve'iloi asik be Moshe, what? And if Moshe Rabbeinu would not have been engaged in the bones of Yosef, Yisrael have ma'aski bei, the Jewish people would not have been engaged. In other words, how did the Jewish people let Moshe Rabbeinu by himself be engaged in taking the bones of Yosef? Weren't they concerned for the oath? If Moshe Rabbeinu wouldn't have done it, they wouldn't have done it. The Pasuk says in Yeshua, the bones of Yosef, that the Jewish people from Egypt, they buried in Shem. Obviously, that after Moshe Rabbeinu passed away in Arvis Moab, the Jewish people were engaged in it, and they brought over the Jordan. But so, moreover, Elon asked by Yisrael, if the Jewish people had not done it after Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, what, the sons of Yosef would not have been engaged in his bones? How did the sons let the rest of the people do it? Well, except it says a pasuk there, meaning at the end of that pasuk that we mentioned there in Yeshua, it says that regarding Shem, that it was for the sons of Yosef as inheritance. Obviously, in their inheritance they were buried, which was very dear to them. So how did they let the rest of the Jewish people do it? So here it's also the same idea. Amru, the sons themselves said, Hinichu loy, let the Jewish people be engaged in burying our grandfather, because his honor is more when there's the multitudes do it more than than when only a few people do it. Moreover, they said, meaning the Jewish people themselves said, when Moshe Rabbeinu was still alive, let Moshe Rabbeinu himself do it, because the honor of Yosef is more by the great ones, by Moshe Rabbeinu, more than the small ones, than to do it with the rest of the Jewish people. Now the pasuk says, as we just quoted before, that ultimately covered b'Shechem, they buried Yosef in Shechem. Says the Gemara, Maishna b'Shechem. Why specifically in Shechem? So Amar B'Cham B'Chanina says, Mishchem gonvuhu. They kidnapped him from Shechem. As the pasuk says, V'yishlacheyu me'emek Chevron. It says that Yaakov sent him from the depth of Chevron, but Yavar Shechem, he came to Shechem, and that's where the brothers were having their animals in pasture. Now, as Rashi says, because Daisan is not really a place. It says that the man said they traveled from him and they went to Daisan. What he said to him was, you're saying, Es acha anochim mevakesh, your brothers don't consider them as achim. They're looking for dasais. That's dasai, daisaina. They're looking for tricks and traps to be able to kill you if you come to them. But really it was Shechem. So since he was kidnapped from Shechem, so the Shechem nachsa v'dasai. So to Shechem is where you bring back the lost ones, meaning that's where he was ultimately brought back to rest. Now the Gemara asks that kashu kra dadi. Seems to be a contradiction in the Pesukim. Because Ksivit says V'yikach Moshe Satzmas Yosef Imoy, that Moshe Rabbeinu took the bones of Yosef with him, meaning and not the rest of the people. It says that the bones of Yosef that were taken up by the Jewish people, etc. So who took it? Was it Moshe? Was it the rest of the Jewish people? So Rabbi Chanina says, if someone does something, a mitzvah, and he doesn't finish it off, someone else comes to finish it off, the pasuk had said is it on the one who finished as if he did it. So although Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who brought it up, since he didn't finish the job because he passed away in Arvis Moab, the other pasuk says that the Bnei Yisrael went and took him out, even though it was really Moshe, because it goes based on Hagoy Meres HaMitzvah. Moreover, Belazayim says that if someone starts and he doesn't finish, they even demote him from his greatness min shemayim to someone who starts and doesn't finish. Unless, as Rashi points out, it was an oinus, like Moshe Rabbeinu, who he died in Neva Yarden. So not Moed Megidulase. But if he willingly doesn't do it, they take him down from his greatness, because the Chilek says in the Pasuk, he was in that moment, Vayered Yehuda, and Yehuda went down, but means he was taken down from his Malucha, because he started to save Yosef, when he says, Ma Betza, but he didn't finish the job. And because of that, he was taken down from his greatness. Moreover, B'Shmuel ben Nachmaniam, he says, someone starts a mitzvah, doesn't finish, so they bury his wife and his sons, which is also because that's what you started to have a family, but you didn't finish, or you're not going to finish. He buried his wife and his kids, like somebody says in the pasuk. But Thomas Bashua, at that time, his wife passed away. And his sons passed away. To finish up this conversation, why was Yosef called bones in his lifetime? Because he said, "You're going to bring up my bones from here," but he was still alive. Why was he called bones when he was still alive? Even though he himself was called it, but because he didn't protest regarding the dignity of his father. Because when they didn't know that it was Yosef, the viceroy, they said, "Avducha Avinu, your servant, our father." But they didn't tell them anything. So because of that degrading to his father's covet, he was called bones in his lifetime. Why did Yosef pass away before his brothers? Because he conducted himself with the leadership, and someone does that, goes and he dies earlier. Now, relating back to what we mentioned, the pasuk says, when he was kidnapped, which is what we just mentioned before, that he was kidnapped from Shechem, it says Yosef was taken down to Mitzrayim. So Amar Rabbi Lazar says, I'll take you Hurad. Don't read it that he was taken down to Egypt. Elohayrid. Rather, he took down Egypt. What does that mean? Shahayrid it's tagnine parim migdalasin. That he took the house down, literally. He took the astrologers of Pari down from their greatness, because when he interpreted the dream and they didn't know how to interpret it, he was Hayrid Mitzrayim, and he took down Egypt. Now, it says, V'yikneu Peitifar Sris Pari. Peitifar, who was the one in charge by Paroi, one of the ministers, he bought Yosef as a slave. So Amar Rav, it means Shekano la'atzmai. He actually bought him for himself, meaning, as Rashi tells us, for Mishkav Zachar, because Yosef was so beautiful. So Vayikneu Peitifar actually bought him for himself for homosexuality. But Gavriel upiroi. Then Gavriel the Malach came and he did Peria, which that's not stam sirus, which is to castrate. It's like an extra level of castrating, like peeling away his organ, because Mikara Ksiv Peitifar. He was originally called Peitifar. Peitifera. He became feminine suddenly because he lost his masculinity, because he was emasculated by the Malach Gavriel, because of what he wanted to do to Yosef. Now, the Mishnah continued and said that Milon Gadol min Moshe b'chulu, who was greater than Moshe, who buried Yosef, so Mida Keneged Mida, Hashem himself buried him. Now, so the Gemara continues, and this Mida Keneged Mida that we're mentioning in the Mishnah, the pasuk tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the Jewish people that Hashem got angry at me and he wasn't listening to me because of you. And so V'yem Hashem Elai, Hashem said to me, Rav loch, it's enough for you. Don't continue talking to me regarding this thing. So Amar Belevi says, B'Rav Biser, he was notified with the word Rav, meaning he notified with the word Rav, and therefore B'Rav Biser, therefore he was notified with the word Rav. Again, Mida Keneged Mida, as Gemara explains. B'Rav Biser, when he was talking to those who he had a fight with, he used the word Rav. He said, Rav Lachem b'nei Levi, by Koirach, Vadasa. He says, enough for you. What are you trying to get more? Now, Kadosh Baruch Hu is medactic with the tzaddikim like the hair's breadth, and he was punished in that same midah. So obviously he had to stand up to Koirach Vadasa, but the words, it's enough for you, was found to be wanting. And therefore, B'Rav B'Sru, he was notified with the word Rav Lach, that he's not going to go into Eretz Yisrael, Rav Lach. So again, the Mida Keneged Mida. Another pshat, Rav Lach was Rav Yeshlach. You have a Rav, meaning when Hashem told him, Rav Lach, meaning you have a Rav. Umana Yeshua, meaning it came time for the Malchus of Yeshua, and as we know, the Klal, the Gemara tells us elsewhere, in Brachas, in L'chom Malchus Nages B'chaverta, one kingship cannot touch another one, and therefore that's why he's being told Rav Lach. Or Devachar, another pshat, Rav Lach is, it's enough for you. Don't continue to ask. Why? That they shouldn't say Harav Kamakasha, how difficult is the master, that he doesn't listen to the student, but tell me Kamasarvin, and how stubborn and how pressing is the student, meaning we look pretty bad over here if you continue to daven, and I keep on saying no, enough. Now it says Gemara Kol Kach Lama. Now why was it so much that he was punished because he said Rav Lach, and therefore he was punished when he said Rav Lachem, he was punished Rav Lach? So Tan Rabbi Shmuel was taught in the Bryce Rabbi Shmuel Lefum Gamla. According to the strength of the camel, is shichana is what they add on to his load. So over here, according to the tzidkis, that's how precise they are, that Moshe Rabbeinu used the word Rav, and therefore he was punished with the word Rav. Now, the pasuk says, again, regarding the events of the day of Moshe Rabbeinu's passing, because we're talking about Hashem bearing Moshe Rabbeinu, it says, Vayom Aleim, he said to them, to the Jewish people, I am 120 years old today. Says the Gemara, the word today, of course we're talking today. Today is today. Well, we're not really teaching anything today. So what does it teach today? When he says I'm 120 today, he meant today is when I have filled that my days and my years. This is the day that I was born. Comes to teach God fills out the years of the righteous from the day to day, from the month to month, that they pass away on the day that they're born. So like it says a pasuk in Shemais, as mispa yomecha amal, the number of your days that will fill up exactly to fill up the exact year. Now the pasuk says, la'ochel oid lotzes v'lovim. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I can't go and come anymore. Says, my lotzes v'lovim. What does it mean that he said I can't go and come anymore? Ilim lotzes v'lovim mamash. If it means literally I can't get around. What I mean, it says in the pasuk, Moshe ben Meir v'esem b'shan b'maisa. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu was 120 years old when he passed away, and the pasuk says loy nos leichai, that there was no moisture of his vigor that was lost. It says the pasuk V'yal Moshe ma'arvas mayim al har navai, that Moshe Rabbeinu went up from Arvas Mayim to Har Navai where he was going to be buried. So B'tanya learned the Brisa that actually there was actually 12 steps over there. Moshe Rabbeinu jumped those 12 steps in one step. So obviously he still had energy. Rather, Shlomo says to handle, to come and go, masa matan to come and to give and to go and come in Divrei Torah. Malamed comes to teach in the statmu mimenu sharei chachma, that the gates of wisdom were concealed from him at that moment when he was passing away. Then the pasuk says, "V'yelech Moshe v'Yeshua yisatz b'oil moed." That Moshe and Yeshua went and they stood by the oil moed. So Tan learned the Brisa, "Isa Shabbos shall yu zugi haisa." That Shabbos was from the two peers, meaning these two chaverim. The beginning of the day, Moshe Rabbeinu was the Rav, and at the end of the day, it was Yeshua. Because nit l'reshus mizeh and nit l'zeh. The dominion was taken from Moshe Rabbeinu and was given to Yeshua. Now, regarding the pasuk we mentioned before, it's B'tanya learned the Brisa. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ilmoli mikra kasev." If a pasuk wasn't written, you wouldn't be able to say what we're about to say. Heichel Moshe Meis. Where is Moshe Rabbeinu buried? B'chelkei shel Reuven, in the portion of Reuven, because the Sibud says in the pasuk, "V'yal Moshe b'Arvas Mayim Har Navai." Moshe Rabbeinu went up to be buried in Har Navai. Not b'Navai, b'chelkei shel Reuven came. That's in the portion of Reuven. That's like it says Basam Hamidbar. B'nei Reuven b'noi b'goimer v'es Navai b'goimer. So Navai was Shasham Meisu Gimel Neviim. That's where three prophets died, Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, because he was one of the sons of Reuven, and that's from their portion. Now V'Eichem Moshe Kavod, that's when Moshe Rabbeinu died. But where was he buried? B'Chelkei Shel Gad, the portion of God, because the Chassid says in the pasuk in Devarim, the pasuk says V'Yar Reishis Loi B'Goyim. He saw his first, etc. Which the pasuk continues, Kisham Chelkas Mechekik Sofen. That's where the portion of the Mechekik, the lawgiver, is buried, which is a reference to Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, says the Gemara, Mechelkei Shel Reuven, Mechelkei Shel Gad, Kama Haba. How far is the distance from the portion of Reuven where he died to the portion of God where he was buried? Arba milin, 4 mil. Eisen arba milin, mihalichai. Who took Moshe Rabbeinu those 4 mil? The Lamed comes to teach you Moshe mutul b'kamfei shechina. The Moshe Rabbeinu was placed into the wings of the divine presence, which Rashi says the wings of the clothing of his glory, whatever that means. And this ministering angel said the pasuk that it says over there, Tzidkas Hashem asa, the righteousness of Hashem he did, umishpata b'Yisrael, and his judgment with the Jewish people. What did Hashem say? Pasuk in Tehillim. Mi yakum li immereim. Who's going to stand up with me against the wicked ones to rebuke them in my name? Mi yisyatzab li impoyel yav, and who's going to stand with me with those who commit sin? Ushmulam, he says, it was a pasuk in Kehelis. Mika chacham, who's like this wise man, and who knows how to find compromise to make between me, Hashem says, and between my sons, between the Jewish people, now that Moshe Rabbeinu is not here anymore. He says, no, it's a pasuk in Eiv. Wisdom is not to be found, or me'ayin, from nothing is found, but that's what he's saying, that now that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. He says, a pasuk in Devarim. That's what was said by Hashem, that Moshe Rabbeinu died. Samalyan Amar, which Tracy brings from Ben Chananel, either it's a Malach, some say it's a name of a Chacham. He says that Moshe, what Hashem said was Moshe Rabbeinu passed away with the Safra Rabbi Yisrael, the great sage of the Jewish people. Now, tell you one the Bryce, but that's a good loimer. He says Shnaim Asamil, Ashnaim Asamil, area of 12 mil square, Keneged Machane Yisrael, which was according to the area of the Jewish camp. Basko Mashmi V'Omer, heavenly voice came out and said, "Vayamas Moshe Safra Rabbi Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu, the great sage of the Jewish people, has passed away." Yesham, some say Loi Meis Moshe Rabbeinu did not pass away. Ksivach, it says over here, Vayamasham, that he passed away over there. Ksivachim says over there in the passage in Shemais, Vayisham im Hashem, that he was there with Hashem. So both use the word Sham. Malahal and Oimer Masham Mashot, like over there he was standing and serving. Afkan, Oimer Masham Mashot, over here he was standing and serving. Now the passage says in Devarim, the Yikbar Isai Begai, that he buried him in the valley, Be'eretz Mayav, in the land of Mayav, Mul Beis Pa'ar, opposite the area of the Avodah Zarah of Pa'ar. So Amar Barachi says, Simen b'teich Simen, it's a sign within the sign. In other words, there's many signs over here where he's buried. Be'eretz Mayav, Begay, in the valley, Mul Beis Pa'ar, opposite the Beis Pa'ar. But for La'achi, even so the pasuk tells us, no one knew where he was buried. And actually, the Gemara tells us, the wicked kingdom, referring to the Malchus of Rome, they already sent Eitzlas, Gastara, by the ruler, by the officer, the governor, Shalbeis Pa'ar, of the area of Pa'ar, and they said, show us where Moshe Rabbeinu is buried. Maybe they wanted to deface the grave, whatever it was. So Amdu Lamal, when they're standing on the top, high above Nidlam Lamata, it appeared like it was lower down. Lamata, when they were lower down, Nidlam Lamala, it appeared to them like it was higher up. So they split into two different groups. But that still didn't work. The ones who were standing on the top, Nim Lamata, it appeared to them like it was lower down. Lamata, those on the bottom, Nim Lamala, it appeared like it was on the top. To fulfill what it says in the pasuk, that no one knew where he was buried. And as the Gemara tells us, it says, Af Moshe Rabbeinu any day even Moshe Rabbeinu himself does not know where he's buried. It says over here that no man knew his burial, but it says the word Ish. It says over there, and therefore, just like they didn't know, so to even Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know. One last Gemara that finishes up this theme. Says, why was Moshe Rabbeinu buried next to this avodah Beis Pa'ar? To atone for the incident of the Pa'ar, which was this avodah Zarah that Klal Yisrael did in his times. Now and maybe let's do the one next Gemara, which the Bach adds on the words over here. He says, He says, why was the grave of Moshe Rabbeinu hidden from people? These are the words of the Bach on the side. It was well known and revealed in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Beis Hamikdash is going to be destroyed, and the Jews are going to be exiled from their lands. Maybe they're going to come to the grave of Moshe. At that moment, they're going to stand and they're going to cry, and they're going to supplicate to Moshe. They're going to tell him, Moshe Beinu, get up and daven for us. Moshe is going to get up and he's going to nullify the decree. Because the righteous are more dear in their lifetime than in their death. You find this when the Jews were in the desert, and they went sour with their actions. They did the golden calf. HaKadosh Baruch Hu got angry at the Jewish people. Moshe said, let go, man, and destroy them. Many righteous were in that generation. Many pious ones. Moshe, Aaron, Yeshua, Eldad, Meidad, V'ayin Zekenim, V'shachacham Talmidim. Now here's where the Girsa gets interesting. The Bach here says Moshe, and the Bach is always Magia, but now they have a guy in the Bach that it actually should say Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. Because, like it says, that Moshe Rabbeinu davened in the merit of the Ovis, because that's the whole point the Gemara is trying to say, that the way the Bach is saying it, Tzadikim Chavivim B'Moisim Yosim B'Chayehim. So you go to Kivri Avos, people go to the Kvarim, there's grace at Tzaddikim, you see that there's a greater merit by the righteous when they're dead than when they're living, and therefore that's why Moshe Rabbeinu is buried by Beis Pa'ar, so that it should be there, and they should stop this ability of the Kitrug of Pa'ar. Thank you to any time for hosting us.